Hello, welcome to the Liverpool Connection podcast. I'm Daz, I've got Steve with me, and today, a very special guest, and I'm very honoured to have her on. The granddaughter of the legendary Bill Shankly, also an author of the Real Bill Shankly, is Karen Gill.
Hey, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I would have had fireworks and everything, but, you know, I'm limited on the budget.
It's all right. We can open some champagne later.
There you go. So I want to delve into this because we as football fans think we know everything about Bill Shankly, you know, and like your book says, the real Bill Shankly, you know better than anyone. So I want to ask you, how was it like just having him as a granddad?
I mean, obviously, like he was my granddad. So, you know, on one level, he was just my granddad. But on another level, obviously, wherever you went, you know, if you were going shopping or you were going out to eat something or if he came to pick you up from school, I mean, he would just be surrounded and swamped with like supporters who would just, right, they'd just engulf him and he would disappear really and that would be kind of irritating. So it wasn't great being, you know, a young child. Wherever you went, your granddad would be sort of, you know, whisked off to talk about football. And it wasn't really until I came to Greece that I understood like how much influence he had like all over the world. So, you know, that didn't come till later. It was kind of irritating when I was younger, I must say. It was just irritating more than anything else.
Well, it's the same. We just had Paul Moran on as well. And he said kind of the same thing about his dad, you know, when you're just trying to have a private moment and then somebody just comes up with a piece of paper and a pen, you know, it's got to be irritating, you know.
Yeah. But I mean, with my granddad, like we would sit down to eat at the weekend and like the doorbell would go, it would be people, like kids usually, they wanted his autograph. And it's not like he would say, oh, can you come back a bit later? I'm having my dinner. Or he would say, oh, right. And he would just start autographing and talking and chatting. So he would disappear. Or then he would get a phone call halfway through the meal and he would get up to answer a journalist call. And, you know, it was just like, it was disruptive, obviously. And I mean, I remember at school, I was like bullied because he was my granddad by the Everton supporters. Do you know what I mean? They were like, who do you think you are, you know? So it was like, it wasn't easy, you know, it wasn't easy. The pride came a bit later, I think.
You should have given it back to the Evertonians because, you know, they've won nothing.
Yeah, I know, but they kind of, I mean, I do have some fond memories as well of Everton because like we, you know, in West Derby where my granddad lived, obviously the Everton training ground was quite nearby. And we used to go like with the dog, we'd take the dog for a walk and he would have a massage or something, or he would talk to the physio guy there. So it was like, it was kind of familiar. Their training ground was as familiar to me as well. So I don't have this animosity towards Everton that some people do.
Yeah, they're like the little brat brother or sister, you know. So you can't just tell them to go away for a while. But what are some of, you know, I know it's hard to say, but what are some of your favourite moments that you've had with your granddad?
Oh God, favourite moments. I mean, obviously, I think going on This Is Your Life was a very, that was amazing because like it was all the secrecy beforehand. We weren't allowed to, you know, if people don't know, probably people don't know This Is Your Life. It's like a show where they talk about, you know, they surprise celebrities or famous people and then they bring on all their relatives and friends and they talk about them. It's quite a nice tribute to people, obviously, I think, in those days. And going on that was amazing. Meeting all your favourite players and your favourite, you know, celebrities. And when you were like 8 years old, that was a great experience. But just like doing simple things like going to eat with him on a Saturday at the cafe near the Old Day Hospital. Used to have like a cafeteria by, and then he would take us and eat something. And just simple things, you know, to go in for ice cream and stuff with him was nice. Being told bedtime stories by him about Glenbuck, which is an amazing place. So all of those things, you know, the proper, you know, that all kids like if they've grown up with their granddads, they'll have those special memories too.
Yeah, because I you know, with my granddad, you know, he used to take me, you know, to Anfield all the time, and he used to tell me stories, you know, of him being kind of starstruck by Shankly and Paisley, and it resonates, you know, down through the ages, you know, to me. I'll hopefully tell my girls about your granddad, you know, because it's part of my life, and it should be part of every Liverpool's fan to know who he was, and that's why we wanted to bring you on, to get more, you know, retrospective on who he was as a man. So yeah, this is brilliant for me and for Steve, because I'm sure he's giggling like a girl underneath all that, because I am.
Always.
Steve?
Yeah, hey, Karen. Yeah, and Daz, he kind of mentioned it, that, you know, we've, through our shows, we've had George Sefton on.
Yeah.
We had George Scott on, you know, and Paul, and they've kind of linked the current team with the history, and really with you know, your grandfather. And I wanted to ask you how, because it seems like, was he always this have these social aspects to his character? Because it seems like it's so intertwined with Liverpool, the city, right? The social mechanisms of the football club. And I was wondering, was he always had this part where I want everybody to be happy kind of personality?
I think, I'm not sure. I mean, he was very influenced by his mom in that respect. His mom was an amazingly generous woman. I think he really looked up to her and he admired her. She brought 10 children into the world, and they lived in a tiny, tiny little house, you know, in poverty, basically. But she was always very willing to help other people, and I think that was in his character. He was extremely generous. Always showed empathy to people who were sick, or always felt for people who didn't have tickets or money, or he was extremely generous. And I think that was just part of, you know, his upbringing, and he brought that, you know. Obviously Liverpool people, I find, generally are generous with their time, with their they will help, they'll volunteer. I mean, you can see that now with food banks and stuff. They keep together like a community, and I think my granddad grew up in a place where community and helping each other and the social aspect of everything was really strong, and it kept the community together, it kept the families together, and I think that's, you know, he brought that into his football and into his life.
Yeah, and obviously that same attitude has kept going strong throughout the city and with the Liverpool, the club. For those that don't know the history of how he became associated with the Liverpool Football Club, can you kind of take us back to the genesis of that relationship?
You mean like he was offered the job and then he didn't get it the first time, and then
right,
in 1959, okay, so in 1959 he was interviewed, he got the job, he left Huddersfield. I think he was the manager of Huddersfield at the time. Well, my mum was actually lived her childhood in Huddersfield, where he was a manager. And then, you know, the rest is basically history. You know, he came to the club in 59, and he kind of just, he saw the potential. Obviously, he had a vision in his mind. I think, you know, he'd been a manager of quite a few clubs, but he didn't have the resources that he wanted. He had the passion, and he always tried to, every club he was involved with, he always tried to appeal to the fans and the supporters. But this was the first time I think he saw the potential of this kind of the supporters who were so passionate, and I think, you know, that's what inspired him to, you know, to make changes at the way the training was going and everything like that. And then, I mean, basically the rest is he just kind of came in and swept everything clean and started from scratch. But obviously there were people there he kept on. There was Bob was already there, Bob Paisley. And, you know, he used their skills and you know, he built on those. Like a team, he obviously didn't do it all by himself, but I think his vision is what sort of steamed everything forward and pushed him, and his determination to do stuff. And he was a very, very determined person with a vision. You know, he was determined to succeed.
You know, you mentioned Bob Paisley, and I know that after your granddad retired, and I believe that was 1974, that you know, obviously Bob Paisley kept up the successes of the team, but then your granddad called that was his biggest regret for, you know, retiring at that time. I'm sure that had to have been a shock to the family that he stepped away at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite young at that age in 74. You know, I was like 9. Yeah, 9. And so, I mean, I can't remember the actual, you know, the details at that particular time. I just know that, you know, suddenly he was a little bit more, he was a bit freer, and he wasn't away so often, and he was a little bit around a little bit more. But I think it was, you know, now in retrospect for me, looking back in hindsight, I think he deeply regretted you know, football was Liverpool, not just football. Liverpool Football Club was everything. He devoted his whole life. And there is an interview he does with some guy on BBC at some point where and I can feel the emotion in his voice. And he says, "I gave my life to that club." And he's almost, that's, you know, he doesn't get very emotional. He wasn't an emotional man. He was a hard man. I can see that he was on the verge. He was very emotional at that time because, you know, he felt maybe he did feel a little bit not betrayed, but that perhaps things hadn't gone as he might have expected. And then, of course, he realized that maybe he shouldn't have resigned because of his own passion for football. He realized that maybe that wasn't a good choice.
Yeah, I you know, we've read about other athletes retiring or coaches retiring, and then they have a hard time trying to funnel that energy and passion into something else. And I guess when you have grandkids, that's a natural place to put your energies and thoughts. So I'm sure that made the transition a little easier. But it's interesting to go back and read just some of the comments that he made, and obviously with you know, the successes that Liverpool still had after those years, you know, it maybe eased the transition a little bit in the minds of the fans, but I'm sure it didn't make it easier for him himself.
I mean, sure. I mean, Bob was amazing. He won so many trophies, and he was incredible. So maybe that made it really difficult. It's hard, isn't it, to get into the mind of somebody whose whole life has been devoted, and then suddenly maybe he feels that, you know, I'm sure when he was going along to Melwood and like after he'd resigned, and people were still calling him boss, and, you know, he still wanted to be involved because it was in his DNA. He didn't want to undermine Bob's position. I'm sure of that. But on the other hand, you can understand why that was difficult for the players, why it was difficult for Bob. But heartbreaking really, to think of him, how he felt, and difficult. I mean, it makes me feel quite emotional because I know how much Liverpool meant to him. It's a difficult situation for anyone, isn't it, when somebody takes over and then, you know, they're even more successful, and I don't know how he felt about that, but for sure, regardless of the success, his life he devoted to Liverpool, and I'm sure he wanted to continue to be involved in some way anyway.
Yeah, you know, one of the great things about our podcast is that we've been able to have journalists and authors on and meet quite a few different ones that have been successful in writing about Liverpool. So can you kind of take us to the thought process is involved for you when you decided to write the book about your grandfather?
Well, basically, I decided to write it. It was after, in 2002, and my grandmother, Nessie Shankly, died, and I went to the funeral because I live in Athens, so I went back to Liverpool for the funeral. And there was a big wreath of flowers from the Greek supporters. And when I got back to Greece, I called them to thank them, and because they had left a card on the flowers, and they were just overwhelmed that I'd called, and they invited me along to their office, which was, they had this tiny little office that they paid for they paid the rent for, and it was full of memorabilia and books, and they'd made a big cake with my granddad's face on it, and it was absolutely unbelievable, the reception that I received when I got there. And I think somebody said to me on that day, so this was in 2002, 2003, you should think about writing a book, because you don't realize how much Bill Shankly means to people around the world. And that sort of sowed the seed in my mind that maybe I should write something like that, because people would like to, know what he was really like. And so that's how it started.
And when you're writing the book, the process of it, I'm sure you found out a lot of things about him that you didn't know, even though you were family, right? So can you kind of maybe share a couple of things that you thought, wow, this is amazing that I didn't know this about him?
Well, I knew, because what happened was we did it with Trinity Mirror, and the editor was also the editor of the Liverpool Echo at the time, Ken Rogers. So they put out like an advert in the Liverpool Echo, the local newspaper, like people just to send in stuff, letters, and we were inundated. It was incredible. And they were so moving, the letters, and so many people had stories about him. That is just incredible, isn't it? To hear all these stories about him that I'd never heard before. Some of them, like one of my favorites is like, he was funny as well. Like, so he would go, there was he didn't like driving. He wasn't a very good driver. He used to sort of ruin the handbrakes of cars. He used to pull them up with such strength. So he had like a guy who lived a few doors down whose name was Ken, who used to drive him around a little bit. Ken was always on holiday and he looked very brown. So one time they were at this like a football festival for young kids, and my granddad said, "Oh, just pretend that you're an Italian football player. Just keep saying sì, no," and they just like spent the whole time pretending that his friend Ken, who was from Liverpool, was this Italian football player, and kids were coming up to get autographs. But other things like he used to go to the hospitals and give the kids cakes and money, and just spend his time with the kids at the hospital. Or he would he would christen or baptize children of complete strangers. Who would do that now? He would take the time off on a Sunday when it was one of his days off, and he would go to people's weddings, funerals. He would turn up at funerals of people that he didn't know and stand at the back of the church to pay his respects. Because people had asked him to, and he didn't want to let them down, and he knew how much it meant to them, so he would do that. He would go to funerals and weddings, and he would baptize children, of complete strangers, but they were Liverpool supporters, because that's how much it meant to them, and that's how much they meant to him.
I read something that you had an interview, and it mentioned that your grandfather kept all the letters and all the memorabilia that in his interactions with fans. So it kind of really ties into what you just said, that he took the time out. It seemed like the people were as important to him as he was to the people, and it's very rare to get a relationship like that.
Absolutely. I don't think he would have got through the retirement without the support and love of all the fans. There's no way. They helped him through it in a way, because he was adored, and he kept getting letters, and he kept responding to letters. It wasn't like, I've resigned now, that's it. People would still send letters, and he would still respond to them. He would type away. He would sit in the front room of Belfield Avenue. That's where his house was, near Melwood. And also, he had the option. He could have lived anywhere when he came to Liverpool. the club offered to house him anywhere he wanted, but he chose a little semi-detached house in a quiet street near Melwood, the training ground, so that he could be near the training ground. It was important to him. And I think the supporters got him through that period after. They meant everything to him, It's like with the scarf, the famous, the scarf that was on the policeman, sort of stood on the scarf, and he said, that's somebody's life, don't stand on their scarf, it means the world to them. And that's true, he kept everything, he kept the scarves, he kept the letters, he kept everything.
I found that interesting, that I'm sure that researching your book, and you get to see all the memorabilia that he had still, and that had to be pretty emotional, I would imagine, as well.
Yeah, it was very emotional, very, very emotional. But really nice as well, because suddenly when I was like 16, he passed away when I was 16, very unexpectedly, because he was never ill. He never had colds or coughs. I can never remember him taking a day off because he felt ill or under the weather or anything like that. And then suddenly he was gone. But because of the strength of his presence, and the way the supporters still love him, and it's almost like he's still with me, because people keep telling me the stories, and so it keeps him alive for me. And so that's beautiful for me. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried to keep the memory alive as well. I mean, it's very important for us to share his story with our viewers and subscribers around the world now. People listening. So we Daz and I, we take a personal responsibility to try to keep the legacy and give out the information and then people can be interested in going to get more history about it. So yeah, we appreciate you sharing all these stories.
And I appreciate you doing that, because that's amazing. That's what keeps his memory alive. People don't forget him. They keep talking about him. Maybe now it's kind of his legend almost seems to grow with time rather than diminish with time. And that's partly because of people like yourself and Daz, who keep, trying to keep the history alive. Because I know that we're doing well now, but we should never forget never, in any field of life, we should never forget where we come from. And I think it's important. And I think if you understand the history of Liverpool Football Club, it's a varied history. It's a tragic history as well as a successful history. And people should know about, the history of the club.
I think his memory has really been reinforced here on these last few years, just because of the constant comparison of Jurgen Klopp to Bill Shankly, right? And just how they're really synonymous with the city, and they're really about lifting everyone up. And I think it's really strengthened and made people realize that are too young to have been living back at that time to realize just how special a coach it was. Not just the start of the success of the team, but to have a legacy that's lasted this long, and it's becoming more mainstream now. With different podcasts that are happening. With the Historical Society that Kieran Smith is doing. And it's been amazing. It's fun to watch. Especially as an American coming to the club. In the late '90s, to seeing that. Coming more mainstream to learn about it. Yeah, I have fun every day learning more and more. So
yeah, I know there's a lot. I mean, I think I heard you at some point saying you got involved. You liked Liverpool from the '90s because that's what you could watch over in America. It's the same here in Greece. There are so many Liverpool supporters just because in the 80s and the 90s that was the club they could watch. It was a team that was shown on TV. And I've got lots of friends in different places around in Romania and it's the same thing. They could watch Liverpool on the television in the 80s and 90s, and they fell in love with the club. And that's people from all over the world. That's kind of amazing.
I think it helped that we were winning trophies during those years.
Yeah, it did. Sure. It did. But
yeah, if they tuned into like 2005, I mean, after Istanbul, they might have turned it off.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
But I also want to, there is such a similarity with Klopp and your grandfather. They just get the football club, but they also get the people, they get the community. And why do you think your granddad just got it? Was it, you know, again, the working class ethics of
Absolutely.
Liverpudlians, you know?
Yeah. I think so.
I think, you know, even with Klopp just being the manager for the last, you know, 4 or 5 years, he's changed everything. I've had, you know, mates' grandfathers go, it's taken them back to the Shankly days, and that in itself is an honour, you know, to be reminded of that. And I'm just like, what do you think your granddad would think of you know, Klopp today and the football club?
Well, I think obviously because Jurgen Klopp seems to be a very passionate, like smart, funny, witty. I think, you know, they would have been perfect match in some way. You know, they would have talked football. They would have had a laugh. You know, of course he would have loved the fact that, you know, he's sort of Jurgen has kind of brought back the glory days. And I mean, you know, that parade as well that took place after the Champions League was just absolutely incredible. A bit reminiscent of '65, maybe, that kind of, you know, with people climbing up dangerously onto, you know, posts and hanging out of windows and stuff. That kind of amazing. I mean, there's so much, you know, there are so many parallels you can make. But anybody who sort of lives and breathes football and loves football he would just love them anyway. You know, that was, you know, all he wanted to do was talk about football. And people say to me, yeah, okay, but all right, so when he was at home, what else did he do? And I say, honestly, absolutely nothing else. It's not like, I'm not just saying that. He didn't. It was just football. It was nothing else. I don't think Jurgen Klopp I think Jurgen Klopp's a little bit more balanced and not so obsessed. So he was obsessed.
Karen, I want to ask you. I know obviously you're close with the Spirit of Shankly group there, and for those that aren't from Liverpool, we only really hear about them when the voice needed to be heard, like when the furloughs were being talked about, or when the ticket prices were being talked about, you know, being raised, and you know, they came to the forefront. But they're more than that. Can you want to maybe give us an overview of their group, please?
Oh yeah, I mean, they're just amazing. I mean, they, like, now as well with obviously with the pandemic and everything, I mean, they've been sorting out parcels for people who are vulnerable. You know, they try to keep the real spirit of my granddad alive, like that kind of sense of community and helping each other and working together. And so they're always there to help out individuals, the less privileged, you know, members of the community. You know, they're always there to look out for fans' interests. I mean, you know, not everybody agrees with, you know, some of the stuff. Like, a lot of people didn't like the walkout, you know, the 77. You know, some people aren't into that kind of thing. But for me, you know, it's no use just complaining about stuff online. You've got to do something. You've got to be active, and that's exactly what they do. They're not just sitting and complaining. They're getting out and they're doing stuff. It might not be what everybody wants, but it's something. And, you know, a lot of people, they've helped a lot of people, and they continue to hold the club to account. And I think that's important, you know, especially now in this, you know, post-pandemic, things are going to change. I think, you know, it would be good to have somebody like the Spirit of Shankly on the side of the supporters to hold people accountable, and for, you know, it's a business, and businesses need to be held accountable.
You know,
to the supporters.
You're absolutely correct, because we've mentioned this numerous times, is that when these, say, talking about like the furlough or the ticket prices, to go out and make a public statement that this is what we're going to do, and then have to come back and retract things, when you could have involved the people from Spirit of Shankly earlier in the process, and get a feel of what is going to, how the perspective was going to be. You know, we're obviously today's Peter Moore's last day with the club, And we always thought that, you know, he was there to bridge that gap between the FSG and the Liverpool, since he's, you know, he's a Scouser. But it seemed like there was still kind of a disconnect between that and the fans. And so I think we've always, I know Daz and I, we both agree that, you know, they probably should be involved earlier in some of these things versus having to be reactionary.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems to be more sometimes a reaction rather than a sort of initiating some kind of positive engagement. But I think, you know, obviously there have been mistakes made, but I think generally, like, for example, Tony Barrett is an excellent, you know, sort of like a supporter liaison. You know, he's like trying to bridge a gap between supporters and the club, and I think and he always speaks very highly of Spirit of Shankly, and vice versa. And so I think, you know, there is that sort of ear. They do listen, but as you say, sometimes you would like them to do it as an initiative rather than a reaction. I think, you know, I think that, you know, there is room for improvement for sure.
Well, I think the supporters this coming up season, you know, if they're allowed back in, have more power now. You know, because football without fans, it's really, you know, I watched the Community Shield, you know, and I'm usually like up for, you know, watching every Liverpool match. I just had it really on in the background. You know, it's just without fans, there's no feeling, there's no soul, there's no heart. So I hope, like, not just Liverpool Football Club, but every club listens to their supporters from now on.
Yeah, I hope so too. Let's hope. That's the. I mean, you almost think that should be sort of a given, but it seems to have got lost somehow in, you know, in the mega box or whatever. And hopefully now with this, some pandemic, something positive comes out of it. And, you know, they've realised the players playing in that empty stadium. I mean, that they must feel as well, you know, maybe they didn't realise just how important that 12th man is. So yeah, let's hope that positive things come out of this. But the Spirit of Shankly, the good thing is that they are there and very aware of the fact that they want to hold the club to account. You know, to have accountability on anything that happens from now on.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring them up because a lot of people think they don't really get into the news until a situation comes up, but they do a lot of good things in the community that
absolutely
you didn't know that. I personally didn't know they were doing a lot of the food bank stuff and other charities, and they have annual programs for the kids there in the city. So those are things that I think people should learn about, that this group, and you can join. So.
If the pandemic hadn't happened, this year we would have had like a Shankly, like a trophy, a tournament near Glenbuck anyway, with kids, you know, in grassroots teams playing against each other, like a competition. There would have been and so that's been set up by them. Unfortunately, it didn't happen this year. Hopefully it will happen next year. But those are the kind of initiatives that my granddad would have held dear. You know, that is a legacy that they are honouring in a positive way, in a way that he would have approved of, and that has a relation to his what he gave to Liverpool and his ethos and everything. So they do a lot. They're brilliant. And some of my best friends, you know, I've made through Liverpool Football Club. They're just special people, you know. They'll give up their time. It's not about money. It's purely about, you know, making sure that they help people, and they give up so much of their time, and they really do spend a lot of time on helping other people. So it's very, it's just amazing.
Now, I know, you know, football is a global sport now, and I read in an interview that you did. You said your granddad would kind of, you know, because you've got the you know, the day trippers that come, and so more and more Scousers, you know, can't afford it, or, you know, they can't get the tickets. And you said your granddad would, you know, be very upset about that.
Yeah.
And I agree. I don't know how the football club could, you know, I mean, what do you do? Put a section with, you know, 10,000 Scousers. You know, it's hard, but, you know, it is a business. You know, so can you maybe talk about that? What your granddad would think of that?
I think, yeah, like you say, you know, I mean, for him, it was all about the supporters, and nothing was about money. He would have played for nothing. He didn't want money. Obviously, you know, he realised that he had to have money to live. I mean, it was a bare necessity. But he would have played for. He didn't. It was not his first concern, and he understood that, you know, he grew up in a poor mining community, and they didn't have money to, you know, to pay lots of money to go and watch a match or anything like that. These were working class people. To see them sort of blocked out of the game almost, like, I mean, I couldn't afford to go to the game on my wages either, you know. I wouldn't be able to afford to go. It's not just disappointing, it's a disgrace, really. But I mean, how can you turn it back? Maybe now is an opportunity. Like we said before, you know, maybe this is an opportunity to change things around a little bit. Maybe the supporters need to, not just Liverpool supporters, but like supporters generally as a huge group, need to start being more proactive, because I mean, it's disappointing when, you know, when you see these sponsors and companies who get so many free tickets and stuff. I mean, and then you've got people who live and breathe and would die for the club who can't get in to see a match. You know, it's horrible.
Well, that's why you see, you know, 50,000 Scousers outside the stadium, you know, in Istanbul, in Kiev, in Madrid, because they can't get tickets, but they'll still go and support. Yeah. I don't know really any other team that gets followed like Liverpool does.
No.
You know, I think it starts with the kids as well. I think the FSG needs to have, you know, a little space for kids to be able to come to the match, a safe, you know, place for them, where the parents could leave them and pick them up later. Maybe, you know, 1,000 kids in the stadium would mean so much to them. Because, you know, a lot of dads can't really afford, you know, to take them and themselves.
Absolutely.
So I would love for FSG to kind of build on that, you know.
There are lots of initiatives, as you say, Daz, that they could do. Something like the old boys' pen, obviously.
Yeah, exactly,
Not just for boys, obviously, for girls as well. But yeah, I mean, I know that I mean, practically there are lots of, you know, now with all the safety stuff, I mean, it's not as easy as it was back in the day, obviously. But there are other initiatives. There are ways to get more kids in. And I think, yeah, definitely they need to concentrate on that. Because they're the future, you know. If the kids don't grow up with that love of Liverpool, then what's going to be left? You know, people who are not really that bothered about the game, or yeah, I'll go, oh yeah, I've got a ticket because I've got like a cheap sponsor, or somebody gave me, you know, that's not like a loyal following, is it? You need somebody who's been brought up with it and they love it and it's in their DNA.
Yeah, you know, you need the chants, you need the songs to keep going, and you know, people like Jamie Webster, you know, coming up with new songs, and you need the heart and soul at Anfield, because if that's gone, you know, then I'm probably gone as well, you know, because you know, like we had a conversation yesterday with Ken Solomon, who does the tours over here to Anfield.
You know, amazing.
Everybody who goes to Anfield, if you're not in the Kop, will be looking at the Kop.
Yeah,
you know, that's the place to look at. That's where all the flags and the banners are, and
that's the heart and soul. The heart and soul.
Yeah, you know, when we're down, they, you know, push us on. But yeah, I think if the soul's gone, you know, it just just ruins what I've been brought up on. And even ruin, you know, God bless him, my granddad, you know, as well. So yeah, that again, I love the way the spirit of Shankly is the spirit of Liverpool Football Club, you know, and you know, I bet you couldn't be prouder.
Oh God, no, definitely not. And all those things we're talking about with initiatives with kids and everything, like that's what the Spirit of Shankly are trying to push for all the time, you know. Fingers crossed, things can be done. There's so much to be done, but obviously, you know, people need to get involved as well, you know. You need more, you need to be able to say that you can represent a variety of people, and so more people need to get involved. And not just, you know, complain on Twitter or whatever they do.
That's right. Hey, Karen, I had a question for you. After your granddad retired and stepped away from the club, did he ever mention any like favorites of his, like favorite players he coached, or people
God,
he worked with? Like, who were there a couple of players that just stood out that he always would talk about?
Absolutely. I mean, he loved Ian Callaghan and Ron Yates.
Yeah.
He adored them. Ian St. John. He really had a soft spot for Kevin Keegan, like a real sort of connection. And Emily Hughes, you know, these were, and of course, you know, like Jerry Byrne, who played on with his broken collarbone. I mean, these were people he admired and thought, you know, these were people who would run through a brick wall for him or for the club, not for him. And they would, you know, and they just were so passionate. These were players, unbelievable players. I mean, you can't really see the like of these kind of top players now. You know, imagine playing a game with a broken collarbone nowadays. People just wouldn't do it, you know. They wouldn't keep going knowing that they'd injured themselves badly, but he did that. So amazing. Just there are so many amazing players.
Who are the bad ones? Let's get to the nitty gritty.
That's right. I was trying to lead into the dirty stuff here.
I don't know. I don't know any gossip, and I wouldn't badmouth any of the old players. But I know that. I know that a lot of them like drank and smoked. You know, I know that they did, or they'd go out. You know, even though they weren't supposed to go out before a match, they would sneak out and go out for a drink. I mean, now, you know, because I've done a few events with some of the old players, they tell me some of the secrets that you know, we did actually sneak out, but he was waiting at the hotel entrance, you know, and he would kind of slap them on the heads, get back in, and you know, so they would tell me some stuff that they did, naughty stuff that they did like years and years ago. But they, you know, people they smoked and they drank. I mean, how is that possible? And they still gave everything on the pitch, and they were amazing athletes.
I don't understand how it's possible either, because you know, I still play footy, and I couldn't imagine, you know, smoking during halftime or right after the game. But you know, we've been fortunate enough at our supporters club. We've had, I believe, 9 legends have come over and had a legends night with us and tell those stories that aren't in their books, and you get to hear the stuff. And you know, and all of them, it's the same thing, just a couple beers and let's tell some stories, and then we're gonna hear them. But I mean, there's so much history of the club, right? And there's so many backstories that aren't necessarily in the books that are written. So so we appreciate any kind of insight that you're giving us today, for sure.
But I mean, if you go to Anfield, it is an amazing place. It does have a real, I don't know, I can't even really explain it, but every time I get goosebumps, every time I see my granddad's statue or the Shankly gates or the Paisley gates, or you know, when you go into, you know, I've been fortunate enough to be able to stand on the Kop a few times with some of my friends, dear friends. It's such an amazing, overwhelming experience. Being at Anfield, you do feel like you've kind of walked into a piece of history. I'm so glad that they kept it as the stadium. They didn't move somewhere else. I'm so glad.
And I was just going to mention that too, is if all the things that people slate FSG for me, one of the important things that they did was keep it at Anfield. And I couldn't even imagine it having, you know, being in a new stadium. And so they get a free pass for me. I'm FSG fan. Anyway,
absolutely. But
just
yeah,
for that,
that alone, as you say,
right.
I was so relieved. I mean, some of my granddad's ashes were also sort of, spread on the pitch, and as were many, many, many other people's beloved, family members, and so in some ways it's kind of almost like it really is like a sort of holy place, and I do get that feeling every time I go. I don't get the chance to go very often, but when I do, it's always an absolute amazing. It's an amazing experience. I hope every Liverpool supporter all around the world at some point gets to feel that, because it's incredible.
Yeah, that's normally one of our features of our show is we'll ask people their first experience at Anfield, and it really brings us back to, especially for me, my first time going there, and I get to relive that by hearing other people's stories, and it's an amazing place, and hopefully all our listeners around the world they get a chance to get there one day. So
yeah, as is now Glenbuck as well. Is that's another amazing place, where the place where he was born. If you think that from that tiny village, there were 53 professional footballers came from that tiny mining village in Scotland. I mean, that must be sort of almost like a unique. I don't think that's probably hasn't happened anywhere else. Such a tiny population to give birth to so many professional footballers. Quite amazing. And now there's they've made a little like a memorial to him, the place where he was born, which is a great it's not going to be wiped off the face of of the earth, off the map. It's going to still there'll be something there to remember him by, the place where he was born.
Yeah, that's probably a good documentary topic, right? To find out why all these football players came from that one little area. That'd be interesting. That'd be something that I'd like to watch.
They didn't want to go down the mines.
That's right.
There is a documentary called Making Shankly, so you can actually watch it on Amazon Prime. It's Making Shankly. My granddad's niece, my second cousin Barbara Shankly, she was involved in making sure that Glenbuck is not just kind of erased off the map. And one of the things is, they had to play football in order to get out of mining. Otherwise there was only two options. You went into the mine or you played football. There wasn't anything else. So that was one of the reasons why so many footballers came from that village.
Yeah, I just saw that documentary on my Amazon Prime account, and so I put it on my watch list. So that'll be something I can do later on today.
Yeah,
I look forward to it. I did have a question, kind of bringing it back to the current team. Obviously, you're there in Athens and have been living in Greece for a while. So we just signed a Greek player, Tsimikas, right? I don't even know how you say his name, but
Chimikas.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of, can you give us some perspective of how excited the people there are locally for having a Greek national be on Liverpool, and from what I see, a great.
I can't give much insight into that, I'm afraid, because I don't follow any other football. I only know obviously that it was big news. They were writing it in the newspapers. It was on the news. It was obviously on the national news. People are obviously thrilled because Olympiacos, he played for Olympiacos, right? They have a special connection with Liverpool because they also, unfortunately, in a tragic way, they have a connection because they also had a tragedy with some football supporters died in an accident in the ground here. So I know that a lot of the time, Olympiacos supporters will go and lay a wreath at the Hillsborough Memorial, and vice versa. When Liverpool supporters come to Greece, they will lay a wreath at the Olympiacos memorial. So obviously they're thrilled. The Olympiacos supporters are thrilled, but I'm not sure about the Panathinaikos supporters or the others. I don't think they really care.
Probably not. Yeah, it's interesting because you did mention that there seems to be a common ground with Olympiacos and Liverpool. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to watch a game in Chicago back, I think 2015, during the summer. They had a preseason game, so it's just interesting to find out, because we're going to have one of the supporters clubs from Tokyo, Japan on here next weekend. And I know that since we have a Japan international, it'll be interesting to hear how they feel about that too. So I'm sure it's very exciting for them as well. So
amazing. Yeah, it will be absolutely amazing for them too.
Well, Karen, it's been fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your granddad. You know, because whenever somebody talks about the granddad, you know, I start thinking about mine, and you kind of, you know, well up a little bit inside because, you know, my granddad was around when your granddad was, so you know, it's just amazing memories to think, and I'm going to think about him all day now. So
can you see like the pictures in the back?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
This is my little office. This is my little shrine to him. So everything that is connected to him is in here. Everything. Pictures of, you know, when we were, you know, me sitting with him as a baby on the grass at Belfield, in the house with the dog. And you know, people kissing his feet on the so the actual supporter who did that sent me that picture with the whole story about how it happened, so that's there as well.
I love the black and white pictures.
Me too. Yeah.
Again, I think it tells more of a story and soul, you know. I'd much prefer black and white pictures. Like my auntie's always said, there's just something about black and white pictures that just get you more than colour ones. So no, that's brilliant. I love that. Yeah, I've just got that.
I know. Yeah, I'll keep looking at that one behind you. It's brilliant, though. It's very good.
Yeah,
very good indeed.
Yeah, it's got to have
there of shoes.
Oh man, don't get me started on those. This is only a quarter of it. Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. These are the ones I want to display.
Right, and the obviously not too smelly ones.
No, I wear maybe 2 of them. You know, I just collect them. I think
I know. They're works of art almost, aren't they? There's something about them. I don't know what it is, but there's something about them. I'm the same.
Well, growing up in Liverpool, you know, with the casuals, I was never able to really afford Adidas. So as I got older, I was like, I'm going to track down all those old shoes that I wanted, and I have. So I'm well happy.
He is well happy about them. I'm going to tell you that for sure.
I got that's 2 favourite things. So I couldn't be happier. But
that's a very, very amazing selection of men behind you there. Very good group.
It is, but I am surprised they didn't put Houllier. He didn't put Houllier on it because he won a ton as well. So but no, it's absolutely like beautiful.
Somebody always gets left out, don't they? Unfortunately.
Yeah. I'm surprised Roy Hodgson's not up there.
Oh God, yeah. Let's not go down that road.
Yeah, no, thank you. But thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Anytime.
And you know, anytime anyone gets to Anfield, please go to the Shankly statue. Get your picture taken with a legend. That's what I would say, and just savor that moment. You know. Yeah. And I do. I love it when I go home and I see people, you know, they look so giddy in front of it and they got the scarf. Yeah. That's heart and soul. And that's what your granddad was about.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Yeah, it always brings a tear to my eye when I see that statue.
Oh, were you, when was the statue, when did that come about? Because I don't remember the year.
I'm not sure of the exact year because my memory is pretty crap. I don't know. I'll have to check on that one. But I know it must be over 30 years, mustn't it? Mm-hmm. 40? No idea. You have to check that one.
Yeah.
Not sure.
We got to do our fact checking.
We'll have to do our fact checking. I did do a tweet about it at some point, but I can't remember the exact date, and I'm sure I'll get it wrong, and then I'll have loads of people going, "Oh my!" Like, you know, some people correct me about, you know, when some of the Greek supporters here know more about my granddad's career and stuff than I do, because I mean, he's my granddad, so but they knew so much. They were correcting me and going, no, it wasn't like that. It was. So I was going, okay, all right. They do, you know, they're so knowledgeable. Some supporters, they definitely know more than I do. And my memory is not what it was. So.
I'm the same. Yeah, I'm sure Steve's the same as well.
Oh, yeah, that's why we do the podcast, so we can go back and listen and remember what we just talked about. Hey, but it's been an honor and pleasure to speak to you, Karen. You have such a great outlook on life, and I know that
Thank you.
Your granddad was such a influence on you, so we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you. He's been a great inspiration to me. Now in my later, part of my life, such an inspiration. Keeps me going. So it's always a pleasure to talk about him. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about him. So.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Well, I guess enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you. I will.
Maybe have a late night, drink.
It's here.
See, I knew it. I knew it.
You just knew it.
Yeah, I'll go get a ouzo and have a ouzo on it.
Yeah. Ouzo, yeah, that's a bit too strong for me.
That's probably one of my worst nights I ever had was on the ouzo. So.
Oh yeah.
You know
what they say here that if you drink ouzo, like it makes you tell the truth. The real you will come out once you've had a few ouzos.
Oh, I'm sure I told the truth until I passed out. So.
Right. Until you could no longer tell the truth.
That's right.
I better not touch that then.
Well, if you're ever in Greece, then look me up and we can have a few ouzos together.
Okay, I'm going to keep you to that promise. So.
Okay.
Right.
When all this is over, so stay safe, everyone.
Of course.
Thank you very
too.
much. Thank you.
All the best to you and your family. Thank you, Karen.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.